This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Atom Audio, Isotope, Native Instruments, Empirical Labs, Sound Porter Mastering, and Trace Audio. You're hearing my voice right now through custom Trace Audio cables and the new Empirical Labs pump compressor mixed through Isotope RX, Ozone, Neutron, Nectar, and Plasma, all mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the links in the show notes. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
I'll tell you exactly what I think. But at the end of the day, I always want you to know that I'm completely aware that the decision is always yours. These are your songs. This is your project. You want me to turn it up? I'll turn it up. You want me to turn it down? I'll turn it down. You want me to shut up? I'll shut up. It doesn't matter. But if you are asking my opinion and you want the best of me, I'd rather just share what my thoughts and be wrong or have you say no than not to know my thoughts.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio.
Someone asked me a while back, do you fear AI will one day replace you as a mastering engineer? Well, it hasn't yet. That's because algorithms don't listen to music or to clients. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. When I master, I experience the music as your fans will, with the honesty of fresh ears. And unlike AI, I master with your intentions in mind, not merely to process the mix and boost the levels. If you want an experienced live engineer to master your music as only a human can, find me at soundporter.com.
Sick of searching for the right cable or wondering how to hook up your studio? Trace Audio has you covered. Based in Nashville but serving studios everywhere, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, patch bay labels, and wiring solutions for home and pro studios. Try out the free online custom patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com to easily color code, label, and organize your XLR or quarter-inch bays, which are popular with home studios. It's sleek, professional, and simple to use. Then use the code RSR15 for 15% off printing and shipping your custom patch bay labels to take your studio to the next level. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Case Newcomb, a recording and mix engineer, producer, and winner of the Music Expo Mix Critique for his live remixing, who's currently working out of the historic Hyde Street Studios in San Francisco. After seizing the opportunity to go back to school and switch careers, Case's audio career has been consistently on the rise. In the studio, he turned intern to staff engineer at Hyde Street Studios in just 6 months. That's very cool. Case rose up the ranks in live sound astonishingly quickly as well, from mixing in small clubs to mixing at 1,000 plus capacity venues within his first year of doing monitors in front of house. He's recently put live sound on hold to focus on a full-time studio career. Case and I met at NAMM at the conference at our Recording Studio Rockstars Working Class Audio Mixdown Online Audio Issues big mashup meetup, which was a total blast where we were hanging out, having a beer, doing horrible karaoke, and getting to chat with everybody. Case has got a great energy and is making some awesome sounding records, including artists like Neverman, Mondo Freaks, Diablo Muerto, and Manos Lindas. And a big shout out and thank you to my brother from another podcast, once again, Matt Boudreau at Working Class Audio, for making our introduction. I believe it was Matt who introduced us. So please welcome Case Newcomb to Recording Studio Rockstars. Case, are you ready to rock, dude?
I'm ready. Thanks for that wonderful intro.
You're welcome, man. Welcome. Glad to have you here on the show. Where are you joining us from right now?
San Francisco, California.
Oh, yeah, man. City of love.
The sun's finally out. It was a long, rainy season in Northern California and California in general. So it's beautiful. It feels like spring has begun in San Francisco. 56
awesome.
Degrees and clear skies.
Well, by the time this comes out, we'll be like looking for snow coming down on us. So there you go.
Oh, that's right. I forgot we're not supposed to use
No, it's all
Let's just
right.
say it's nice in San Francisco.
It's nice. Yeah, it's what's the song? It's something in San Francisco.
I left my heart in San Francisco.
And maybe that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
San Francisco's a trip, man. When I was there, driving downtown, it really reminded me of Maine. I was there in June, and the weather was like cold, wet air coming in off the bay and stuff. I guess it's got that, the fog rolling in and stuff like that. You guys get a lot of fog there?
Depends on what side of town you're on. On the west side, Ocean Beach, anything west of Twin Peaks, you might be familiar with the big radio antenna Sutra Towers. Once you get west of the big hills that separate the San Francisco Peninsula, all the fog is really, really heavy. We're on the east side, which is known as the Sun Belt. So you can grow you can grow tomatoes over here. And I used to live in Maine, so I know what you're talking about. It is 56 mostly year round and a little bit damp in the mornings and definitely a little damp at night. That's consistently the weather out here, I think.
Good clothes wearing weather.
It is.
Good jacket weather.
What's that?
Good jacket weather.
Yeah, my adage is t-shirt in the sunshine, sweater in the shade.
Right on. And is that where you grew up?
Oh, no. I moved around quite a bit. Had a father that didn't like to stay in one area for more than 4 years. And then my parents divorced when I was young. So my mom went and settled in a southwestern suburb of Phoenix, Arizona called Ahwatukee. That was in the early 80s. And then my dad at that time went back to Southern California where I was born. My first memories are in Long Beach, San Dimas. Then we went to Massachusetts for 4 years. The parents split. Short answer is I spent a lot of time in between Phoenix and Orange, California.
Mm-hmm.
Then Orange was really where my happy place was. Then my senior year of high school, my dad went to Las Vegas. I spent 9 years in Las Vegas, kind of getting on my own 2 feet, playing in bands, parking cars, valet, bartending, really starting to get into the customer service skills. And then I moved to New York and spent 14 years in New York. And then we met a girl and came out here. We left New York in 2018.
Right on. What was it like doing a band thing in Las Vegas? So is that where you said Los Angeles or Las Vegas?
Las Vegas. Moved there in 93. Got into my first consistent, I was only in a couple bands, but in the late 90s, I got pretty serious about it.
Did you have 6 strings on your instrument?
I did. I was a guitar player, a little shredder. I used to play guitar pretty good.
Right on. Yeah. And what's it, I think of Vegas, I was there for a conference and it was my first time really. And it's really, it's very much, at least what I saw, the Strip, it's very tourist focused. It's very, it's the casino life and I would imagine tons of cover bands and stuff like that. Is that what it felt like there? Or did it feel like you guys were into original music and doing your own thing?
That's actually a great point about the cover band versus the original music thing. There was a fantastic small music scene in Vegas that was pretty supportive. It was very easy to get tapped in and know everybody very, very fast because it was a small town. I think back then it was less than 1 million people. There was a huge growth spurt that was happening in the late 90s and early 2000s. And what was really cool about Vegas being so small was everybody knew each other on the local scene, but then also the shows that were happening at small venues. So venues like the Joint at the Hard Rock, the Small House of Blues at Mandalay Bay, which would kind of open around 97, I think, around 1997. They were getting all the big shows, the big acts, and playing at these small venues. So you also had access to see all these really cool bands at very small venues. And we had this other place called the Huntridge, which is still there. I think it's a landmark in the city. It's an old movie theater. I saw Sepultura in 1993 there. I saw Bad Religion there in 93. So all the heavier kind of rock stuff that was happening there. So you also had access to see a lot of big acts in small venues, like I said. So there was this cool little energy. But the other shift was the cats that were really working and making a lot of money and also making it in the music business were later you'd see bands like The Killers come out of Vegas. But my understanding was they were doing all their stuff in LA and San Francisco. So they were anybody that was making it was in the industry as an original act was leaving town to get that done.
Yeah.
And people that were making money in the business were working at the casinos. And that's where I kind of started to get a rub as far as a professional point of view was I could see like, well, if I'm going to stay and make money, I could see like the next 20 years. I was starting to hang out with like the Blue Man guys. Like Elvis Lederer is a really famous guitar player out there. He's one of the old school Blue Man guys. So I was hanging out with those cats, and I was like, oh, if I break into this, I'm just going to be playing in house bands for 20 years or playing a show for 20 years. And that really wasn't where my vibe was at. So that's part of the reason I left town, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, I remember being a young engineer here and getting introduced to some opportunities. I mean, I actually went and interviewed with Adrian Ballou to be his personal engineer, which is, you know, from you know, Adrian Ballou, great guitar player, and the opportunity was amazing, but at that point, it just didn't feel like what I wanted to do. I just wanted to do something different in my own thing. And it's funny how, like, when you're starting out with this, there can be a lot of opportunities that could all be great. Like doing a house band for 20 years in Vegas could be like a hell of a great career, you know, with home and family and all that kinds of stuff. But if it doesn't hit you right, it's just not
I mean,
the direction
definitely,
you wanna go.
especially back then before the housing market exploded. So
Yeah.
there was cats that were making good money, doing what they love, playing in house bands. Cats like Elvis that crushing it. Like Elvis is a good example of like having that. I mean, the Blue Man vibe is it's a different kind of creative kind of vibe over there, right? So it's got this wonderful mix of just like, it's just not your cut and paste Broadway show, you know? So there's all these cool kind of cats that are around that. But then there was this place called the Double Down Saloon in Las Vegas where everybody would hang out after the shows and after they get done bartending, and everybody would just this huge collaborative mix of different types of genres with dancers from like Cirque du Soleil and then bartenders and people in local bands. And it was this punk rock. It's still there. It's punk rock kind of vibe was the bones of it. But he had an act there called Uberschall that played like, I think like once a week, every Sunday. So he had all this big intersection of like art and community and creativity all happening at the Double Down Saloon too. So even though they were doing that for their, you know, I would presume for their paycheck, there was all this other creativity happening that enabled.
Right.
As
totally.
well as them, you know, being able to own houses and, you know, put their kids through school and stuff like that.
So you ended up, you were in New York. Were you doing music and recording in New York before coming out to LA?
A little bit. Well, LA, I never came to LA. I went from New York to San Francisco. Yeah. I was playing, you know, I played in one band called The Jugs for a while, and that was about it.
The
And
Ducks?
The Jugs.
The
like a milk
Jugs.
jug. Juggs. Yeah. With this guy, Kareem Button. Fantastic guy. He owns this bar out in Bushwick now called Button's World's Famous. His little brother's Dalil from TV on the Radio. So it was tapped into the kind of the downtown Brooklyn, Williamsburg scene. But I was really only in that one band, and I didn't really know how to be in 5 bands and get it done. And I didn't really have the emotional intelligence to be in a group environment and be successful at that. So what ultimately would be happening is I was more refining and honing my service industry and bartending skills instead of my music skills. And as my social and emotional growth started to happen to the point where that would have been more productive for a group environment, my music skills at that point had been waning because I put them off. And I just was burned out, and I didn't care about music. I didn't listen to music. I didn't go to recording studios. I didn't go to shows. Maybe I remember I went and saw Iron Maiden once. That was the last show I remember going. Oh, and like Prophets of Rage, because I was really into Rage Against the Machine. But for like 10 years, I didn't barely even listen to music, and I just wasn't into any of it. I was like kind of brokenhearted and kind of in a dark, lonely place, and I just wasn't into music. It was actually the pandemic and having nothing to do with my time because all the bars and music venues were closed. I was running bars at music venues. And just getting my first mix together took about 2 weeks, learning remote at City College. And then once I got that first mix together, and my metric for a mix is once I start leaning in and start to feel it in my body, I'm like, all right, it's in a good place. And once I had that experience, then I was hooked, and I started listening to music again. I started loving music again, and I started wanting to be around musicians again. I started going to shows again. It was really odd to be like that isolated and find a way to reconnect with music. And it was also somewhat intentional. I looked at the course catalog with just trying to find something to get into in my downtime. And I thought, well, maybe if I go and learn about recording studios more. I always kind of had a knack for it. It was weird. I had like a small setup in Brooklyn, an old Motu M2, remember those? Like I think the 828 M2. Like, so I was always just had a knack. Like I would read a book and it'd say, put the mic there, and I put the mic there, and people were like, wow, why does it sound so good? Like, I don't know, the book said put the mic there, and that's what I did. So there was all these little slivers of moments of recording where professional people would respond and be like, wow, this is really, really good.
So you decided to go back to school for recording.
Correct.
And sort of like rekindle your excitement about the music and everything like that. So that's pretty cool. So for you, has it been sort of like this fast-paced, it's like catching fire again about music and recording, and then finding yourself in such a great opportunity?
It's been wild. Yeah. Well, the first thing was the fact that it worked, that I fell in love with music again, and I found another way to be involved and be excited about the creative process of music. The fast-paced nature has more to do with my impatience combined with a vacuum that was created during COVID in live sound that otherwise wouldn't have been there, combined with a very fortunate vacuum that was created at Hyde Street Studios that was probably 10 years in the making.
Well, it sounds like don't discount the fact that you also just have been developing these service skills, which are a big part of what we do in recording and production and engineering too. It's just learning how to be a servant to the music and to the artists that we work with.
That was going to be the next thing I was about to say. Yeah, exactly. Is the reason it's happening so fast too is I've already like refined those skills in terms of like service and operate. I did operations management with large groups of staff, with diverse populations of staff, and understanding how to rise in the ranks in one career. All of those truths are applicable to almost any field, in terms of professionalism, emotional intelligence, all the things that make you successful in one arena will definitely make you successful in another. So I took everything that I had applied and learned to get good at bartending, to get good at managing, to make just to make myself a success and be able to survive and provide for myself in one industry. And I just went with all of that. And then I came into this like at 180 miles an hour with full dedication. And I just came in so hot and hard. And I'm continually, so everything's happening at a very, very, very fast pace.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, so talk about where'd you end up at school learning the stuff?
City College of San Francisco has a free city program, and they have the broadcast electronic media arts program. Dana Dana J, who's known colloquially around town as Mama Sound, OG San Francisco audio engineer, live sound studio owner, was the chair of the department at the time. She quickly took me under her wing, and I just did all the classes there, and it was mostly just remote. And I had time. I mean, the CARES Act was happening. My partner
it's fascinating. So you're like doing remote classes to learn about live music.
Studio mostly, and then when it came time to do the live sound stuff, I was able to get my hands on some gear, and then my first gig doing live sound.
This might sound like a weird question, but do you think there was a possible small advantage to learning remotely in that all the examples for recording you were hearing over little speakers back in your own setting where you're familiar with it? Do you think it like gave you a perspective? I'm like, because I think about I was learning in a college environment on big studio monitors, which in a way are a little bit alien to begin with. And then you're learning all these techniques. And then it takes a lot of practice later to figure out, how do I make this sound good on my home speakers, And I wonder if learning remotely might be like, oh, you can just hear it immediately that way.
I guess I had bought, I still have them at home, just like a pair of Atom Audio T75s, 5-inch, just the intro. Yeah, they're about $500 a pop. So I had to learn how to craft my mixes and everything off of these two speakers in my listening environment. I got very lucky in the sense of my place has like these, I don't know, I just got very lucky with the acoustical treatment. It just works in my space. I don't know why, because I have this bay window that looks out into San Francisco, so they got odd angles there. I have a long back, so I feel like the waves just kind of like don't come and slap back at me as far as what I'm saying, like the kitchens, the apartment extends all the way back to the kitchen. I just put some bass traps in the corner And then I just learned these speakers to death, and I learned how to make things sound good on this. So yeah, having that consistent listening environment and learning how to only mix on these speakers in this room for like a good year and a half, I think definitely was an advantage in that sense. Yeah. And then also just having all the time in the world because of pandemic.
The Atom Audio speakers are great. I mean, the T5Vs are ones that I use in my control room. I'll be mixing this podcast episode on those. And to me, they're really pleasant to listen to, and they're fun to get familiar with.
I do, yeah. Like at our other like in the box studio down the street, we have a pair of AA7s and a match sub. So eventually, I'd buy the match sub for these because like it was getting a little hard to. I couldn't hear below 80 well. I mean, it says it goes down to 44 hertz on these things, I think. But when you put that load on those speakers, really hearing the low end. So I did buy the match sub. That helped out for critical listening. But with the match sub, $1,500 getting started out. I don't know if there's a better setup on the market right now. I think the Atom stuff, especially at the intro level, is you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. And then at the high level, I think they sound fantastic.
Yeah. Atom Audio proudly announces the D3V active desktop monitors and H200 dynamic closed-back studio headphones, designed in Berlin for pro-level monitoring in home studios. The D3V features 3.5-inch woofers with ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact design ideal for songwriters and producers. The D3V includes USB-C and balanced analog inputs, a headphone output, and DSP room acoustics. The H200 closed-back headphones feature powerful 32-ohm drivers and comfortable ear pads in a durable metal construction, making them perfect for studio or portable use. The included plug-in enhances tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot at atomaudio.com. At Isotope, saturation just got a whole lot smarter. Introducing the new Isotope Plasma plugin to supercharge your sound by giving your tracks exactly what they need, precisely when and where they need it. Unlike traditional saturators that apply a static effect, Plasma's groundbreaking flux saturation technology analyzes your sound and applies dynamic processing, adding targeted warmth, depth, and character to bring out the best in your mixes and masters. Use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off the new Plasma or any of the awesome plugins at isotope.com. So let's see. So you did the school thing, and then you came out of school, went straight into doing live sound first?
My first gig ever was doing remote recording during pandemic, recording the California Symphony. Actually, wow. Because Dana J had set me up with this very fantastic guy, David Bowles. He's the vice president of the AES out here, Juilliard trained classical cellist, who's like one of the absolute top like opera and classical recording engineers, the mix engineers. He had double booked himself and needed to go up to Marin. So he reached out to Dana about having a student come in, and she sent me the email, and I just jumped in. I had to read the manual on the Grace M108, and he has a ruler. I mean, he uses measuring tape. This guy is serious. He's a very, very clinical engineer, and I just went down there and did it.
So you're recording just cello, or you're recording a whole ensemble?
No, so that's a good. So when I talk about cello, I'm sorry, maybe viola. That's what he played as far as his training when he was in Juilliard back in the day. I think it was cello. But this was a 5-piece horn section, and then it was also 2 opera singers and a grand piano, one of them being a Grammy Award-winning opera singer. So that was like my first, and it was all synced to video. So wow. I'd never done anything like this. It was terrifying. So
what were some decisions you remember making about how to set up mics and stuff for that kind of music?
That's a great question. I was do exactly what David Bowles did during setup. So he came in and set everything up, measured everything. I wrote down all his measurements, but then we had to strike and reset. So I had to reset all his mic positions. So that was just all like under his mentorship and just basically watching what he did and then mimicking that the next day when he was gone, and we had to actually film and record the the ensembles.
Do we get? Do you remember any of the details about what sort of mics went where, or like how things were configured?
For sure. Like he had a lot of hypercordioid high-end Sennheiser mics, the skinny black ones. I forget the models. And he would do kind of off the bell stuff, nothing too direct. So like for the French horn, it was like get it behind it, but just get it kind of more off of the bell, not off the hole. Same thing with the tuba, get it over the bell, off to the side, so you're not getting so much of the attack and the warmth. For the piano, he actually did a really simple setup. It was just kind of like, he just took 2 small pencil diaphragms, just flared them out, just kind of like lined them up for the low strings and the high strings, got a nice balance.
Sort of like looking in through the open.
Yeah, coming out
something like that.
Like if you were standing in front of from the side of the piano when it opens up, and you just literally took 2 pencils and pointed one at the low end and one at the high end. Not insanely complicated, but it's not, and then used his ears to make sure it sounded good and phase was good.
Okay, so that was one of your first gigs. Let's jump forward. Let's talk about now you're also doing stuff at Hyde Street Studios,
sure,
which is a historic place right there in San Francisco. Tell us about that. What's Hyde Street Studios, and who's Wally Hyder?
That's a good. He went right to Wally Hyder, right? So Wally Hyder opened up Hyde Street Studios in '69, and at that time it was the highest quality largest production studio in the Bay Area. This was before Fantasy Records would have opened up. And what was really cool about that space was it's laid out in a way where the kitchen's downstairs. So everybody's got to come from every studio, and there's a lot of just mingling in the hallways. And back then, like, they're famous for like Green River from CCR. Their first record was recorded there. First Crosby, Stills and Nash record, I think.
It's a multi-studio facility.
Yeah, the A, B, and C were the big rooms back then. And back then they had more chambers that Wally Hyder built. Bill Putnam came in and spec'd out Studio D upstairs, I believe. Studio C, Eric Burden, Spill the Wine was recorded in that. The famous story is he's flying high on acid in that small booth. And now they call that Wally's Hideout, the guys up in Studio C. So there was a lot of very famous records that were recorded that helped shape the San Francisco sound, which fortunately was one of those small windows which shaped national culture and politics and international politics. So they were the centerpiece of the extension of the beat movement and the love movement. That was where everything was getting captured and recorded.
And this was 69 was when it was started?
69 to 72 was like, I think, the big magic window of all that. Fantasy Records would open up after the CCR. They made so much money off the CCR stuff.
Wow. And is this, is the location anywhere near like Haight-Ashbury and that kind of...
That's a great question. Yeah, no, it's actually in the Tenderloin. It's in the funky spot of town. And apparently that neighborhood's always been funky. But when you see on the news, like San Francisco has this huge drug issue and fentanyl crisis and all the homeless, that's where Hyde Street Studio is.
Wow.
So it's funky. It's in a funky spot. Haight-Ashbury was farther west. And that was funky back then in the 70s too. There's a reason those artists were able to afford to live there. That was a big drug rundown neighborhood. And then Michael Ward bought Wally Hyder Studios around 1980, and then in the late 80s switched to a lease model. So then where I work out of Studio A, the main big room downstairs with the big famous Neve 8038, everybody loves that one. It's all 1081 channel strips. So that's a very coveted console. That's still everybody's under the umbrella of Hyde Street Studios, but every room outside of A is leased. So Studio C, Wally Hyder's Hideout, you got some fantastic engineers up there like Jameson Durr, Scott McDowell, and Chris McGrew, and Rowan. Those guys have that studio. Then we've got Otis McDonald up in Studio D, who's also known, Joe Bagel is his name, and they're all crushing it. Those are the main three. Downstairs, Studio B, which is the old lounge room where the pool table is Trent Berry and his people. He's also the president of the San Francisco Philharmonic. So he's got DreamRack Studios there. So, and then there's quite a few other people renting spaces. So every foreseeable corner of the building's been leased out. And there's a lot of little studios on top of just the main original three, A, C, and D were the big rooms.
Wow. So that's a lot of studios in a spot. That's pretty cool. And does it still feel like a place where people can run into each other in the lounge area and where people are, you're having conversations at the coffee machine?
Every day, every time. Yeah, it's really cool. That's where people go to eat lunch. Upstairs, there's another table, but the coffee's downstairs. And the fridge is downstairs, and the bathroom. And so, actually, there's bathrooms upstairs too. So everybody's kind of forced by the nature of the layout to interact at some point. So yeah, there's a very communal atmosphere with all the engineers and producers in that space, regardless of what room. It's a very, very supportive community. Oh, can I borrow your mic? Yeah, sure. Oh, you got to. Can I grab that DI? Whatever. It's a very communal atmosphere, very supportive. It's none of that throwing anybody under the bus, cutthroat, screw you. There's just not the energy there. It's just very supportive.
People aren't attacking each other with their Grammys in the hallway?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, there's Grammys in that building. There's quite a few, and I don't see anybody smacking anybody over the head with them.
Yeah, I mean, we hear people talking about like the old school communal studio environment a lot on the podcast, and I've experienced bits and pieces of it in different places and always loved it. Yet most of us live in a world of home studios, working somewhat in isolation, even doing records without, with the remote overdub nature. It's even possible that the closest we get contact is, Zoom calls with people. But I will say that that's one of the reasons why we started the podcast, or why I started the podcast, was because I wanted to bring that experience of conversation in the studio to everybody, because I loved it so much, being in a control room and hearing stories and having those chats. And so we appreciate you being here on the show, man.
Oh, I appreciate being here. This is fun. Thank you.
So let's see. I like to ask guests when they come on the show to sometimes share an inspirational quote or talk about somebody that just sort of maybe inspired you in this process of learning how to record and mix and all that.
Yeah, it's not a quote. In class, they had us watch Pensado's place. In the and they said pick any Pensado place you want. So I picked the Blackbird Studio. My brain is blanking right now.
The Massenburg room or something like that.
The guy that owns Blackbird Studios in Nashville.
Oh, John McBride.
Thank you, McBride. Yeah. So you figure this is just going to be like audio nerd, just like dripping from the ceiling like gems, and you got your notepad ready. They talked about audio, I swear. Maybe in my memory, like 20% of the time. But the thing that I took from that hour plus podcast was what they said was about professionalism and work ethic. They literally said, give me somebody that knows how to show up early, that has communication skills. I mean, I'm going to fill in my own blanks here, but the gist of it: emotional intelligence, maturity, professionalism, humility, a willingness to learn. That's what's going to get them in the door and keep them in the door. I can teach anybody to push faders.
Right.
And that was like the most powerful thing for me. It was like, oh, my professionalism and my energy and who I am as a person is what's going to not only get me in the door, but sustain me. And this was long before I had an internship. This was this like deep pandemic first semester recording. But I was like, that's what I took away. I was like, oh, this is great. So I have a chance, because I'm really good at all that stuff. I have a really good work ethic. So I've always just thought that, and found it to be quite true, that humility, work ethic, passion, genuineness, excitement, interest, curiosity, that those are the things that they'll gravitate towards you, and then they're willing to mentor you. And this is very much a mentorship game, and it's very much a trust game. So
yeah,
I think
big time. I mean, let's talk about that for a sec. Why do you think it's a trust game? I've got some ideas, but you go first.
Well, let's just start with the gear. First of all, we walk into a room, I'm sitting in front of 30 1081 channel strips that's $1 million right there. And at Hyde Street, I'm on an original LA2A, an original LA2, original U47s, like just the gear alone. But really, I think the most important thing is the material and the artist in that space. As far as like when someone comes in and they're creating something, or they're recording something for the first time, you're dealing with the most private, personal space of people, not only creatively, but also in their material. They got to be able to trust you with that material. That's not going to hit Spotify, that you're not going to share that with your friends. You shouldn't even be sharing that with your partner at home. Like that's That's theirs. So that level of trust, not only to be vulnerable in the studio, that's a whole nother thing of producing that we can get into, but that level of trust of just the material, the gear, the environment. You're not going to show up in the middle of the night with all your friends and trash the place, drinking it. Like there's so many layers of trust that go into it. But
Native Instruments introduces the new Complete 15 bundle featuring Contact 8, offering versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative effects, perfect for creating everything from emotional scores to dance floor grooves. Contact 8 includes exciting new creative tools like chords and phrases for inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a hybrid instrument blending organic and synth sounds. The Complete 15 bundle also includes updated Massive X, Guitar Rig 7 Pro, and AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. Empirical Labs, creators of the famous Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio pros. The Fatso adds warmth to digital recordings with harmonic generation, tape emulation, and compression. The Pump, a 500 series compressor, features 8 selectable ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, and an attack mod for incredible transient control. The Arouser and Big Freak plugins are also available at empiricallabs.com, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Follow at Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. No, I think that's the critical one, because the whole point of doing what we do is to try and create a recording of music that is compelling, that is that's mind-blowing, that is emotionally moving. And in order to do that, people have got to be able to show a vulnerability, that one wrong move and it could kill them. It should, there's a level of that in the creative world, because that's where the stuff that's really compelling comes from. And I think if the people we work with are thinking about us as a invasion of the studio and the creative process, then they're never going to be able to open up and do anything risky. And then they won't end up with a result that is amazing,
100%. And even at a base level, from a producing hat, just making someone feel comfortable to perform. If you're choking their performance right out the gate, even if they're not, it's like not the most vulnerable thing. Creating an environment where they feel comfortable just to express themselves, even with material they're complete. They've shared at the coffee shop. They're not like, this isn't like some deeply, but something that they're already comfortable sharing with others, just to create an atmosphere where they feel comfortable performing. Because studios are intimidating if you're not really experienced, especially new people come in, they see the big console. It's normalized for us because we do it every day, but we always have to remember, well, don't you remember, like, if this isn't someone that's 20 years in the game, and even if it is 20 years in the game, they don't know you. How long you've been working with them? So even if they know the mic and they know the room and they're aces, but it's like, who is this person pressing the button that on the other side? Like, did they welcome me? Did they make me feel warm? Did they make me feel comfortable? Did they offer me coffee, tea, show me around? So I don't even talk about the recording for the first 15 minutes. Like, how you doing? Can I get some water, tea? Here's the restroom. How was your day? Like, it's just all about the personal side of getting them comfortable. And then there's the more deeply personal side that you talked about, which is once you build that trust with people. I mean, it's one thing if you're hired for that project and you have a relationship with them already, but if you're working with new people, building that trust and creating that atmosphere of where you can be that vulnerable in front of me, it's kind of the job. It's kind of what you should be doing even if you're not producing, even if you're just engineering and someone else is producing, knowing how to be the right presence in the room and hit the buttons and not get in the way of that and make someone feel safe and comfortable around you, even if all you're doing is hit and record and stop.
Yeah. Now I'll follow that by saying, at the risk of sounding like we're a bunch of mushy woo-woo, like,
I like mushy woo-woo too.
ultra politically correct record makers. It's not that. It's, I mean, there's all kinds of levels of what could make somebody feel comfortable and safe in the studio. Like sometimes I work with somebody where it's like, it's all about feelings and I have to be like very thoughtful and careful about my feedback. Other times it's being, a total snarky punk rocker, and that's the way to make everybody feel comfortable in the studio.
Sure, yeah.
And, I think that like, I'm curious your thoughts on this too, but I feel like just like an artist needs to find a way to be most truthful to themselves, true to themselves in order to like make great art, even to like be a great help in the studio through engineering or producing. I feel like there's a level of like, we need to be true to ourselves. And even if it means sometimes like we're not going to do a great record with person A, but we'll do a great record with person B. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that sometimes you do need to just kind of own your own story when you're working with people, and so that you can find the very best people to work with?
I think so. My career is short enough to where, and just long enough to where I'm seeing what project am I right for and what project am I not right for.
Right.
I think back to your earlier point about the snarky punk rocker thing, that's where like the years and years of emotional intelligence and customer service and dealing with, I bartended in New York, Vegas, Phoenix, all over the place, and being exposed to so many different walks of life is just knowing how to like, what does this person need? What do these people need in the room? Is this the person, like a teacher would think about this? Is this the person, the child that I can, not to call the clients or artist childs, but as an example, as a metaphor, is this the child that can be scolded in front of the classroom, or is this the child I need to take outside and talk to them? So like, if I got to talk to you about your guitar solo, should I be pulling you off to the side, or can we talk about it in front of the band, kind of a thing? Or I use levity a lot, like not only to cover my own butt, but like also like to make people feel comfortable. So is this the kind of person like that I can just bust their chops all day and they like that and that's cool? Or is this the kind of person, like you said, you got to be really, really delicate with? I have a project that I may or may not happen, and we were talking about the mixing phase, and I have a producer I want to bring in on the project. And I realized like, I'm really good at being able to get along with almost everybody. And I think that comes from from this bartending and being around and exposed to so many different cultures, so many personalities, so many different ethnic and economic backgrounds, whether it would be like a politician or like my coworker, I've just been around so many different walks of life, especially living in New York, that I'm very comfortable, and I've always been very comfortable with people, but I've also learned like differences in how people operate as a result of that process. So they wanted to also have me maybe track and mix. And the more I thought about the mix, I was just like, you know what, maybe I'm just not the right person for this mix, because I don't think I understand what you need enough to give you what you need. So at a certain point, I will own up what I'm capable of and what I believe I can do. And if it's not right for the project, I would rather the project be successful as possible, if that means me removing myself from it.
Right. Well, that already preemptively starts to answer a question I would ask, which is, whether there's a story that comes to mind about an important failure in the studio. Like maybe there was a situation that didn't go as perfectly as you hoped, but turned out to be a great learning experience for you.
For me at this phase, it's not about the social stuff and the emotional stuff. I got that. That's what makes me feel really good about like owning who I am and what I'm capable of and it's the technical stuff. It's just not having 10 years under my belt of making mistakes. The other day I had cross-patched. For those who don't know what that means when the mic lines are coming in on channel 3 and 4, they're normal to a preamps on 3 and 4, but if you start getting noise or signal degradation, you're like, oh, let me jump those mic lines over to preamp 6 and 7. Mm-hmm. Well, I had done that earlier as we were trying to isolate some noise. Turns out the noise was in the piano, was never in the preamps. Then I went to go mic something else, a different element, and I was like, what's this room sound? I'm not really digging all this. And then in front of the client, I was just like, oh crap, those are the Neumanns that are on the piano. I've been recording the piano instead of your close mics on your saxophone. I'm so sorry. it was cool for like the ambient stuff, but I was like, what's this room sound? I've been working in this room for like a couple of years now. I don't know. And then I pulled the patch and I was like, oh, because I had cross patch. So I wasn't even using it's like little things like that. Or like one thing that's been getting me a lot lately, I love is just if someone can't hear something, what's that? What are you gonna say?
Well, I was going to say, let us know if your people skills helped you like resolve that mistake and still keep everybody comfortable on the session.
It did in a couple ways. All of the trust and the friendship that I had built with this person up to that point, it was just me and them in the studio. But they were like, they had enough patience for me to have that. And then I pulled the patch in front of them and I was like, well, I probably shouldn't have done that. I probably should have waited for you to leave. So I was also vulnerable. And they're like, it's cool, but did we get the other part? I said, yeah. And then I would have, if we needed to record, luckily he wasn't happy with the sax solo, so we didn't have to go back over it. So luck had something to do with it. But all of those soft skills leading up to that point gave me enough grace to kind of like, and him to give me enough grace and patience to be like, oh, it's cool. People make mistakes, you know. Had it already been tense in the session, that could, you know, something like that could have been a deal breaker, actually.
So to reinforce what you're saying, I've certainly had experiences like that. And what's such a kick in the ass about those moments is not that we make mistakes in the studio, but that we can sit there and think to ourselves, how could I be so dumb? I just listened to this sound for like, for like however long. And how did I not notice that didn't sound right or whatever, you know? And sometimes when we start on certain things, we just simply don't know what a right sound is until we learn it. And then we come in and we quickly assess those things. But other times we have this incredible ability as human beings to tune out what's wrong. So I always like to think of the analogy of like driving that crappy beater car as, you know, in my 20s or whatever, where like, I don't know, the driver's side door never opens or something like that. And I always have to go in through the passenger side door to unlock the driver's side door and then come back around to get in, or the window doesn't roll up or some goofy thing. And I just like learn how to tune it out, and I'll drive with it for like a year with this stupid thing that just, you know, when I finally fix it, it was like, oh, that wasn't so hard. I should just fix it in the first place. But, you know, like it reminds me of doing a session where we were at Sunset Sound. We were in studio. We were doing a vocal.
Cool.
This was this band, The Living Things. And Lillian was singing on the mic, and we put in hours and hours and hours of singing. And I was so focused on what I was focused on. And then we finally like get back later, and I pull up the vocal in the home studio setting or something, or I had just simply turned the speakers up, and it's like the noise was horrible on it. And I just ignored it. My brain tuned out that there was like hiss and noise on the sound I was recording. I'd completely fucked up the signal chain. But anyway, not to steal your show here. I just was thinking about what you said and thinking it's such a familiar feeling, you know.
I care about your thoughts too.
Thanks very much, Case. I really appreciate it.
It's odd to not be ask you questions in a conversation. Yeah, in that case, it was really even odder because I was clinically evaluating the scenario, going like, I said, I don't like this room sound. I don't understand. I said to the client, I was like, I don't get why these mics are. I had a 441 and a Fostex printed M11 ribbon close mic'd. I was like, I don't get why it sounds this. I'm not feeling this room sound. I've never heard this room sound this way. I know this room inside and out. So on and on and on, why he's tracking. And I was like, well, we just need to keep going. So whatever this is, whatever. So when he came back in, and I realized it was a pair of 84s on the back side of the room that were where the piano was. I was like, it's so obvious. Like, and this whole time I was blaming the microphones. I was blaming. So I was so zoomed in on it. Like it never once dawned on me that it wasn't the microphone that was plugged, that was pointing at the source.
It's a great reminder that 99.999999999% of the time, whatever's going wrong in the studio is user error.
100%. And I have an adage. If something is signal flow, right? If something's not working, plug it in and turn it on. 99.99% of the time, that's what's wrong. So in that scenario, it just wasn't plugged in.
Yeah.
Or because it was plugged into the wrong place. And every time I find something, the patch is plugged. It's not, the patch is wrong. Oh, I plugged into the aux out instead of Pro Tools out. Or it's not turned on. Oh, I got a tube mic. I'm looking everywhere under the hood, looking at the I/O, looking at everything. I'm like, oh, did anybody turn on the power supply for the 47?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then sometimes, like with my
the
U67,
compressor, turn it on, Huh?
If it's cold and I turn it on,
yeah,
it doesn't even pass signal for another 5 minutes or something like that.
Oh, really?
I don't know if it's quite that long, but
I know what
it's
you mean,
longer
yeah.
than you would expect. So you have to like be patient and wait a sec. But the thing that always helped me out, especially in new studios, and it helps me even in my studio, is to just stop. It's the same thing as like somebody saying, hey, if you retrace all your steps to find your lost keys,
Mm-hmm.
if I've got an assistant or an intern with me, I'll verbally just start saying out the entire thing step by step to them. And inevitably, a lot of times I just am able to solve it. It's like just through describing the problem to somebody else, I can figure it out quicker a lot of times.
I talk to myself all the time in the studio especially when there's problems, or you know how big fast sessions happen. Like you have to stay organized. It's like, all right, I need you to do this. I need to do this bus, this input, this output, this headphone set, pre-fader, blah, blah. So I'm not messing things up. So yeah, I'll walk like, that's exactly, I just start talking out loud to nobody. Yeah. Do the same, for the same reason. Like, oh, right. I plugged it in, I turned it on, blah, 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 blah. It's just, what did I do wrong? And you find it eventually.
Are you sick of searching for the right cable only to realize it doesn't even exist? Or maybe you're asking yourself, how in the world do I hook my studio up? Well, say goodbye to those headaches, because Trace Audio can get you wired up right. Based in Nashville, but serving studios nationwide and around the world, Trace Audio specializes in custom cables, labels, and wiring solutions. From labeling your patch bay to wiring your full studio or large format console, Trace Audio does it all, whether you're a home or pro studio owner. And the real game changer is Trace Audio's custom patch bay label designer. It's a one-stop tool to color code, organize, and design labels for your 1/4-inch or XLR patch bays. No more wondering where things are on your patch bay, when instead you can have sleek, professional labels that are easy to read and easy to use. Try the free online patch bay label designer at traceaudio.com and use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom labels and take your studio to the next level.
Did you know that one of the most common fears with audio mastering is not knowing if your mix is ready or not? Look, nobody wants to send a mix in for mastering only to realize there's some resonating low end that's going on that wasn't picked up in the mix. That's where I come in. Hi, I'm Brian Murphy of Sound Porter Mastering. As soon as you send a mix for me to listen to, I'm already on your team. Mix feedback and master readiness is a service I offer for free, and for good reason. That's because a great mix produces an even greater master. So if I can help you minimize oddities and issues and even provide some advice that will help your mix translate better, then mastering becomes more efficient and effective. And you don't stress about those issues at all. Just go to soundporter.com. There you can find videos, a FAQ, and a pre-mastering checklist on my website that will explain a lot of what you need to know. When you're ready for great feedback, just reach out via my low-friction contact form and send me a mix to hear. Again, you can find me at soundporter.com.
Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session, a.k.a. the second half of the show. My guest today is Case Newcomb, joining us from San Francisco. How you doing, Case? You ready to jam?
I'm good. I just thought about Rice-A-Roni all of a sudden.
No, me too. I keep
80s.
looking for like some song, some jingle, and I don't know what the hell it is yet. But I do know that when I was visiting San Francisco, I was one of those people that was like, holy shit, I'm taking out my phone. And I'm like, there, and I'm videoing out the window of our Uber or whatever. I'm like, there is nobody driving that car right there.
It's terrifying.
Video.
Yeah. Those Waymo cars, I'm not into it.
You're not riding in those. You're not taking those.
I don't like them on the street, to be honest. Like, I don't want them around. I'm not, maybe I'm not progressive enough in the terms of auto flow and traffic, but it's not for me.
It's a little bizarre. It's a little bizarre to see a car driving without somebody driving it.
Yeah, it's like, who are you going to honk at? There's nobody.
Who are you going to honk at? Who are you going to honk at when they run over your baby carriage? Ew, that's gruesome. I think, yeah. What about that in a broader context? Do you feel being out in San Francisco and so close to Silicon Valley and all that, that you are that you're sort of on the edge of the future, and that's infusing itself into record making and creative stuff? Or is that a dumb question and I should talk about guitars instead?
I think it's everything affects everything. For me personally, real quick, the only thing about those Waymo things, I think either all traffic needs to be on the same grid or not hybrid. I think either everything be on automated so everything can talk to each other. It's the likelihood of risk of collisions and traffic interference is a little less.
It's like there's trains.
Everybody on the grid. Yeah, like everybody be on the grid or nobody be on the grid, which I'd be fine if everybody was on the grid. But for me personally, I think it's exposure to some of these people, which can help see the way they view technology, for me personally, can help shape the way I view technology. I was filming, it was a CEO, one of the main people at ChatGPT and another CEO of another AI company, and they were talking about the future of ChatGPT and how they use AI and all this stuff. I did a video and film recording. So it's just me and these three young, very successful tech people that were creating the tools that are shaping our landscape as we know it.
At least they're shaping some of our conversations.
Definitely, at least the conversations. But just the way they talked about AI and ChatGPT, they just viewed it as a tool. So it helped shape my perspective and openness to modern tools and just how I would integrate them into my workflow. And I'm editing an audiobook right now, and every single phrase I'm running isotope voice denoise because there's a lot of lip smacky. So I'm using AI every single time, all day long in the studio. And to me, it's just a tool. Ultimately, my ears and my heart, my soul, and my experience is what I put into it, and I make the final decision. So I don't know how much it affects the creative process for the community at large, but it is nice to be on the cusp of everything that's happening in American technology, or at least that's based here in America, and getting the front line of that and just having exposure to that.
Yeah, it's a very tech savvy city, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, but there's also one of the most, people might forget that it's also one of the foremost leaders in the audio engineering industry also. I mean, John Mayer, we have large-scale PAs because of what he did with the Grateful Dead. Obviously, the music movement and the tools created.
Oh, that's Meyer Sound? Is
Dolby
John
Laboratories. All of us were just at Dolby the Dolby Laboratories. I can walk there, and it's only a couple of miles down the road. Skywalker Sound is in Marin. Apple, all these companies are here. I don't know. I hope people know that Universal Audio is just right down the street. I mean, Scotts Valley is only about a 45-minute drive away from here. So, like, there's a lot of history in the audio technical engineering side of things. Bill Putnam is a pretty big deal for American engineering. And that's San Francisco. Wally Heider also being one of his buddies. So I don't take that for granted. And it's nice to pay attention to that and be aware that that's the history of the city, and be lucky enough to be in a city that had a big cultural movement, not just the Summer of Love. There was a huge rap movement in the Bay Area. There was a huge rock movement. Let's not forget what was going on in the 80s and 90s. The punk scene, a big part of the pop punk scene blew out of this town. The ska punk scene blew out of this town. Bands like Primus, the thrash metal scene. So it's just San Francisco's a little quiet right now, but it has the chance. And I believe that's another reason I like being in this town, is why it's kind of in a dip. There's no reason that this town can't just blow out some more stuff again. It's done it decade after decade. The tech thing has slowed things down a little bit, I think, but there's a lot going on in the East Bay. I see a lot of really good bands in town. There's a lot of talent in San Francisco. Don't sleep on San Francisco. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on.
Right on, man. Well, what about for you? What are some things that just really get you excited about music and doing what you're doing now? Why do you want to do it at all?
That's really good. The dream is literally to be around the magic moment as much as possible. Like, how often can I be in the room when the hair's standing on the back of my neck and there's a performer's just destroying it that I'm connecting with? Like, how often can I be in that moment? Like, that's the dream. And I would just want to live there as much as possible. Sometimes you're just at an intimate show setting and you see it in a live show. A lot of times it's in the studio. Some days I walk in the studio, I don't even really know what the client is. I'm like 30 seconds in, I'm like, wow, today's going to be a good day, baby. You know what I mean? And then there's like the fun of developing acts and working or co-developing, like working with acts and helping them realize what their dream is and then helping them perform better and get to where they want to get to, or seeing things that they don't think are possible, but they want to be able to get out, and then helping them achieve ways of getting things out that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise on their own. I really love creating an atmosphere of collective support, safety to be vulnerable, and then also pushing people to do better than, I don't think better than they think they can do, but doing the things that they hope for themselves to be able to do, and then giving them some outside opinions about the things that they're not seeing to help refine some of the stuff that they could be doing better. And that's all the producer, and that's just the natural producer in me that I love doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other part of being a good hang with people so that they can trust you and open up to do their best creative works, is that when that does happen, you're absolutely right. To be the most help of all, you then have to be willing to, when appropriate, step back in and offer criticisms or suggestions for places that could improve, or just perspective. You know, just one of the roles we always have doing recording is we are a pair of ears on this side of the speakers, listening to what's happening on that side of the speakers, where the microphones are, what people are creating. And we have an opportunity to give some feedback. You know, we may hear something that, like you said, that you might be aware of, that could be like, hey, by the way, did you notice this here? If this was, you know, had you considered this, whatever it is, you know, sometimes it's stepping in with tough love when you're, you know, a welcome producer. Sometimes it's just like, hey, you know, I noticed that this is doing something here, and I wondered if maybe because of the tempo, it caused these things to bump into each other. And, you know, is that helpful? You know?
Yeah, and especially where I'm at in my career, I'm building a career. So, and I really think a big part of building a career is building it to the ground, from the ground up, with people that are your peers and coming up together.
Yeah.
And so I'm really focusing on working with local developing acts instead of trying to chase the established act carrot.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of Grammy award-winning engineers around here, and mix engineers and producers in town that are already working with those cats. I'm not going to make my name chasing a Beyonce session or something like that, you know? So a lot of those sessions start with being hired as the tracking engineer. But just because the way I'm wired and the way I'd like to get involved, and the trust that I'm lucky enough to inspire people early on, they end up being quickly evolving into co-producing sessions on the few things I've worked out. So now when I start projects with new bands, as we have pre-production conversations, I ask them, are you open to co-production, or do you want producing? And also a valuable lesson I learned is, if you are going to do the producer conversation, what does producing mean to them? What are they looking for? Are they just looking for some general feedback? Do they need help with organization as far as like getting people's schedule lined up? Do they want you to help with arrangements? Like, once you start getting into arrangements, now you're starting to get to a very personal level of the song and opinions and things like that. So it's also kind of like, how much do you want from me?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good. I mean, I ask that of a lot of, or I've learned to ask that in my studio when I'm working with a band that has come in. They might just simply book a day. Oh, we just want to come and do some songs, which by default is essentially kind of an engineering gig. But then once we get going, if I hear something, I'll just ask them, would you guys like some more feedback? I mean, if I hear something, do you want me to comment on it? and they say, yeah, and then I'll give them the feedback. And I'll often preface it with, take it or leave it. And it doesn't bother me. But here's some thoughts, some observations. And it's good because then, you want the artist you're working with to have as much of a sense of control over their art as possible, I think.
You brought up a lot of really good points in a very short period of time. I think that's the perfect bridge, social bridge, is I always, especially when I'm working with somebody new, is, would you like to hear my opinion? Would you like feedback? Especially once I start to see people going oh, what did you think about that?
Yeah.
That's not a question I like to answer with somebody I just met. So feeling that out, crossing that bridge, through that bridge, we have to remember that people look at us on, especially when we're in big studios. Like I work in pretty big studios, so people look at you and they're like, there's always this established preconceived notion that you really know what you're talking about because you're on the other side of that glass in front of that big console. So there's this more willingness to listen to your opinion because, there must be a reason. They might not know it's only my second session I've ever done.
You were there when we got here, so you must know what you're doing.
Yeah, you must know. Yeah, for all they know, I've been doing it for 10 years. But I always empower people to know that they're in control through many, many uses of psychology. But one of the most overt ways is what you do. I say at the end of the day, I just want to be clear that regardless of my thoughts and opinions, which if you care and trust, I'll tell you exactly what I think. But at the end of the day, I always want you to know that I'm completely aware that the decision is always yours. These are your songs. This is your projects. You want me to turn it up? I'll turn it up. You want me to turn it down? I'll turn it down. You want me to shut up? I'll shut up. It doesn't matter. But if you are asking my opinion and you want the best of me, I'd rather just share my thoughts and be wrong or have you say no than not to know my thoughts. And then, of course, you have to play the game of awareness of hey, maybe I'm timing a little too much right now because they might be getting irritated. Let them work that through themselves. Then there's that extra layer of it. But I'm always trying to let them know that they're the boss in a certain regard. So it's their material. It's their stuff. I'm here to serve them. And that goes into a deeper level of I'm there to serve. And that's what really has been the key to my success, is having that kind of philosophy and attitude towards working with others.
iZotope is truly amazing for mixing and mastering your music, like the new iZotope Plasma plugin featuring flux saturation, which helps you sculpt the harmonics in your sound, enhancing the excitement and clarity of your tracks or mixes. And Ozone, with its built-in mastering assistant, helps you analyze your mix, suggesting all the settings you need for a professionally mastered result based on your chosen style of music and EQ curve, referencing a specific song if you want. Ozone features sophisticated yet simple modules like clarity, impact, low-end focus, stabilizer, imager, exciter, and spectral shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting, allowing you to adjust the settings to your taste so it sounds incredible. And with the magic of master rebalance, you can even manipulate the vocal, bass, and drums separately at the mastering stage. Use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off Plasma Ozone RX or any of the fantastic plugins at iZotope.com. Atom Audio is proud to announce the new D3V active desktop monitor system and H200 dynamic closeback studio headphones designed in Berlin and perfect for pro-level monitoring in a home studio setting. The D3V is a fully active desktop monitoring system featuring 3.5-inch woofers and hand-folded ribbon tweeters for studio-quality sound in a compact form in elegant white or black finish. It's perfect for songwriters, producers, podcasters, and mixers with digital input over USB-C or balanced analog inputs, and includes a headphone output and DSP room acoustic switches. The H200 is Atom Audio's Rockstars' new closed-back studio headphone featuring 40mm peak drivers and memory foam ear pads in a durable metal construction with a detachable main cable for dual-sided connectivity, making the H200s reliable for demanding studio use. With an impedance of just 32 ohms, they will sound great with your studio or laptop and include a plug-in for enhanced tonal control and stereo spatialization, so you never have to leave the sweet spot. To see the new D3V monitors and H200 headphones, go to adamaudio.com. And if you guys don't use my suggestions, that's absolutely fine with me. I mean, I'll still go home at night knowing that I was right and you guys were wrong, but you are not use it.
That is, yeah, like, wow, with creative stuff, I don't know, but technical stuff, I'll be like, hey, man, like,
hey, that room sound, I know it was unexpected, but it was really kind of cool. It was really making the track, those U87s by the piano.
Yeah.
One thing you said, which I think is important to remember too, is you said, sometimes I need to know that they just need to work it out. And that's a hard one to do sometimes. The problem solver, sometimes I think we have an inner problem solver. I don't think if it's that it's not even that inner. I think if we choose to do recording engineering, by definition, we're problem solvers. That's why we wanted to learn how to plug the whatchamacallit into the where does it go, But there are a lot of times where the best solution is don't solve the problem for the person, because you're stealing. I'm getting very meta here, but it's like there are times where in order to sort out the musical part, even if I think I got it, I have to just bite my tongue, because the only good solution is when they sort it out themselves.
There's that, and there's also if you shut the F up, they might present a solution you never imagined.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there you're impeding the creativity. It's just like I talk a lot. You can't even imagine what I was like when I was a bartender. I feel like if somebody said, "What's your job description as a bartender?" I was like, the ability to talk for 10 hours straight and not be boring. Like, that's how much.
I thought it was listening. I thought you were supposed to just be a listener.
No, I was just my show, baby.
That's in the movies.
That's the way I did it. Yeah. So just understanding how to take turns and listen and create space to have something unexpected, because if you're constantly in control of the conversation, the conversation's going to go the way you want it, which is also a very important philosophy in terms of playing with others musically, socially, emotionally. It's really meta. And it's that real meta heavy philosophy, love, awareness, empathy, consideration, thoughtfulness, listening, attentiveness, all of these deep and being very present, being healthy and present to give yourself the ability to do all that. This stuff is, to me, what really transcends somebody in the studio from just being your average Joe engineer to someone who's working
Case,
all the time, retaining customers. Huh?
I feel so understood, man. I really feel like you know me.
Yeah, I mean, but I know it can sound a little sappy, but in the moment, that's what really great engineers and producers are doing. Yeah. And this is all firing. I am never more engaged than when I am producing and engineering at the same time. Every cell, every strand of DNA in my body is focused and present for 10 straight hours. And I'm thinking about a million things, as well as all the technical things that are happening in order to manage the session well. And then I've never walked out of and committed and given 150% of myself in anywhere else in my life other than when I do that. I've never felt that kind of focus and drained than being in the studio. And people, I think, recognize that, and they feel it, and they see it, and then they call you back up, and they're like, "Hey, let's do another song."
Right on.
So I get real meta about it. So personally, but yeah.
Well, share a story about something that felt like a real moment of success, or like an aha for you in the studio going through this experience.
That's cool. Mine was more technical recently. Thanks for asking. There's certain things that I start to realize only happen with being in front of a console for hours and hours and hours and hours. So I'm going to talk about compression, the great mystery of compression. The compression I always use when tracking and typically mixing, unless I'm parallel compressing and crushing the crap out of something. And if you are crushing the crap out of something, make sure you bring up the makeup gain, or else you're not going to hear what you're crushing. Is I do a lot of opto compression on the way in. And as long as you're not adjusting the threshold to the point where you're hearing distortion, you're really not generally hearing that kind of compression. It's slow, it's subtle, especially if you want to use something transparent like a distressor without any of the harmonics engaged or harmonic distortion engaged. Or I'm doing something like percussive fast attack, fast releases. You're catching transients, just helping out with a little bit of the punch. You're not really hearing that kind of compression unless you're really attuned and your ear's really, really good. You can see it in the waveform, and you can see it in the gain reduction, and then you hear the gain make. But that kind of compression is just kind of like default compression. I think.
Break down. When you say opto compression, tell the rock stars what's opto compression.
Okay, so
and if I put you two on the tech spot, you can also say that at any point.
Well, no, I mean, if you understand the basics of opto compression, you have a photo sensor that lights up. That you send a certain amount of current through the side chain of the compressor to tell it this is going to feed a tube that lights up. Then there's a sensitive material in it that reacts to that and triggers the compression time. And then all you have control is how much information gets sent to that sidechain trigger to the luminous element that lights up that the compressor reacts to, and then how much output gain that you get. So it's a very slow kind of movement.
Right.
What opto compressor is.
It's cool to hear you describe it. And it's true, Rockstars, that some compressors, opto compressors, literally have a pulsing, shining light bulb with a sensor built inside. We never see it. That's the thing. It's like the big shame of opto compression. We never actually see it happening, do we? I guess if we saw it, it'd probably ruin the compressor feedback circuit.
I guess so. But on the distressor is an example of how you do the settings, right? Because I also use 1176s like that a lot. I slow down the attack and release. We're really sensitive, but to the point where they start behaving like an opto compressor. So on a distressor, your distressor plugin, everybody at home, there's a little thing that says opto. Your attack time is going to be to 10. Your release time is going to be to 0. And your ratio is going to be 10 to 1, which gets into the realm of limiting. And then you use your input and output to kind of make it act like an opto compressor. Yeah. So that's your settings. On a 1176, you slow down the attack time to a certain point, and you speed up the release time to a certain point. You can go anywhere from 4 to 1 to 12 to 1. It starts behaving like an opto compressor. Well, the other day, I had everything blah, 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 and I was just talking, blah, blah. And I was just sitting, the big breakthrough aha moment was I had a compressor on some element. I'm not even sure what it was. I believe I was using 1176 to try to use it more like an opto compressor. And all of a sudden, I just heard from, all the rack at Hyde Street Studios is behind you. But all of a sudden, I just like out of nowhere was like, oh, that's that element by ear. I was like, oh, that's being overcompressed. In mid-conversation, I just turned around, barely looking at the compressor and adjust the attack and release time. And I don't even think I messed with and maybe the input a little bit. And I just adjusted, just like, oh, I'm not hearing the compression anymore. To have that level of like, oh my God, I can hear, like other than parallel bus compression, like I can actually hear and react and be like, oh, that's being a little overcompressed. Like those are subtle things. That was a big aha and a game changer for me. And that only just recently happened. And that's after almost 4 years of messing with compressors, whether it be in the box or out of the box. And to finally get to the point where I'm like, oh, that's what they mean. You can hear compression.
Yeah.
So that was a big breakthrough because I feel like you can't turn back, and it's just something that only happens with time. And it was a big breakthrough because it's encouraging. That means that the skills can be learned if you're paying attention and you care. That the mystery of what you see, everybody looks at Andrew Sheps, and they should, Andrew Sheps and Tony Maserati and all these geniuses in the industry, but they've been doing it for 30 plus years. You know what I mean? Like, so everybody, like, that's the standard they hold themselves to. When they make a mix and like, why doesn't it sound like the Metallica song or that Andrew did? Or like, how come Andrew mixed 99 Problems on the Neve 80 series with one compressor? I think he mixed that song. Like, how does he do that? Well, because he's Andrew Sheps and he's been doing it for 30 plus years and blah, blah, blah. So you're trying to hold yourself to these standards but you start to see little instances like this where you're like, oh, I can do this. This is a learned skill. If you care and you pay attention and you have the knack for it and you're a problem solver and you have the ears for it, those are things you can't really control. But if you have a knack for it, then you'll grow and you'll get better with time.
It's so true. Like the first thing we learn is we learn about how stuff works. You learn descriptions, and then, in school settings, I remember learning like what's going on inside a compressor. What does it do? So
Sure.
I'm learning the sort of technical understanding of the functionality of it. But you're right. You're absolutely right. It took me a while to understand, well, what the hell does it really actually sound like? It wasn't until I was done with school that I really began to understand the sound of what a compressor could do. And it was in the studios that I was interning and working at. And it was because I watched people using them too, who knew how to get cool sounds out of them. I remember the first time Bob Solomon, who was the owner of Woodland Studios, showed me what parallel compression was. And he played me the drums, and then he played me the parallel compression channels added to the drums. And I was like, my eyes went wide, and I was like, holy shit, that sounds amazing,
It's pretty cool.
And then with Brad Jones and Robin Eaton over at Alex the Great, and, he was, and we had the Rack Alesis 3630, which was this stereo compressor. It was $100 or something, but it was the first totally awesome, totally usable. It had like stereo linking in it, so you could do stereo compression. You had complete control over threshold, attack, release, ratios, and it had a limiter circuit in it.
Cool.
And I mean, you didn't want to push it too hard because it was a crappy little IC
Started
chip.
to distort and stuff like that.
But it was just so cool to be able to like dial those things in. And then later the distressor showed up, and then that was the real, like you said, the distressor was the one where you really, I think what's so great about it is you kind of can't break it, You can do everything from a big, soft, round compression with it to the most extreme drum compression you could ever imagine. You can intentionally adjust the distortion levels and stuff like that, or keep it clean. And you can do everything in between. So therefore, while you're using it, you get a chance to discover what all these different settings do. And it really did help me. And then, like you said, your ear, you just begin to understand what sounds are like. And then you walk in and you hear a sound later and you're like, oh, I know what that is.
I want to deep dive on that distressor a little bit. Only for the people, like, just keep in mind, whoever's listening, just for the people that haven't experienced it long enough to understand why it's such a good tool. And I've just been around just long enough to like really understand why it's such a good tool. I remember when that thing started hitting studios, when I was playing in studios as a guitar player in bands, and everybody just being like, oh my God. I couldn't understand why. But that thing is so flexible. It's like if you only have to buy, you can only have enough money to buy one compressor for the rest of your life. I think you just have to buy the distressor because you can. And also, I wanted to bring up what you talked about before. You understand why you have to buy you would only be able to buy the distressor. For an example, in my opinion, you have to understand why. And that's the one step of school that I tell people it's worth to go to school for a little while, or at least read for a little while. Because in the studio as an intern, you see how to use compressors. You can see how they sound. Like, I didn't know you could get like minus 15 gain reduction on a LA2A or 1176 and still not have it sound over. I was like, wow, you can hit the needle that hard? I thought 3 to 5 was all you could do. And then right. So I was just like, so you see engineers and you start to see how you use compression. But if you don't know the difference between a VCA, an opto, a FET, a Varimu, you don't know why they're grabbing those compressors. You don't know why those compressors are able to act and respond in those certain ways. And that's the beauty of the distressor, is you can have it act like a FET circuit, an opto
right.
circuit, or have it transparent, which I do that. Like if I had a Grace preamp and I use the opto setting on that with 0 harmonics, nothing, it's about as clean as I know how to get a signal coming in with compression and preamp. So yeah, then you understand why the flexibility of that unit is so impressive, is because you can make it act like an opto. Again, like I said, you can make it act like a FET. You can make it act like a VCA. But what the heck is a VCA? What is a FET? Like, what does that mean, fast attack? So I do think there's a lot of value in reading the manuals in school and like learning about what these things are and why a 2 mic reacts different than like a FET mic or a dynamic mic, or different types of polar patterns. There's a lot of stuff in the why that's, I think, is important. You don't have to deep dive into everything, but I do think that helps prepare you for your audio career and your recording career is through understanding the why, not just the how.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, let's jump over to talk about some record making. Be My Side, the remix.
Oh, the By My Side thing?
Oh, excuse me, By My Side.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sure, I'll pretend to start over. Okay, let's talk about the record making. By My Side remix. It's a great sounding track. What's the story with that? That's one where you actually won a contest, didn't you?
I did. My buddy Loic Mastachi here in San Francisco, he's now the chair of the AES San Francisco chapter, has a music expo. It's basically like a NAMM, but on a smaller scale here in San Francisco that got slowed down during the pandemic. It's happening again this fall in person. The last one he did was remote during the pandemic. So that was on pause, but it was something that San Francisco people and the engineering community and music community in general were a part of. So that was a class mix. That was stems that we got from our teacher. And they said, go ahead and mix this. Bear in mind, this is a pandemic and all I'm doing is music. So I'm living this mix. I have no idea how many hours I put into that thing. But I didn't even use delay because I didn't know how to use it. I didn't feel confident that I knew how to use delay. So that's all instinct, reverb, compression. What
were some of the instrumentation? I think I remember there's keys, horns.
It's a great instrumentation.
Great vocal track.
It's classic R&B, classic American R&B soul. It's like a bari sax, tenor, trumpet. There might be, I think there's 4 horns, so there might be an alto sax in there too. Oh no, it's probably trombone. Keys, some kind of Rhodes, guitar, drums, bass.
And how were you mixing it? Were you mixing it on just in the box?
In the box studio, Pro Tools with the Slate Audio subscription and Atom Audio T5Vs. This is before I even had the sub.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you remember about the way that you ended up mixing this stuff? So talk about some of the decisions you made about routing, about treatment of drums, vocals, all that kind of stuff to the level that you can remember what you did.
Okay, so I would have done all the drums and I would have done a sub bus to do some light bus compression on the drums. I would have done sends on the shells to a room verb.
And wasn't this a live recording? Was it a stage recording or a live in studio?
It was a professionally recorded studio recording that was performed live in the studio. So it was just like a great take that they got. So that's another thing. I can only mix as good as what's given me. That the quality of the songwriting, the performing, and the recording were all A-level.
Yeah. And was this recorded to tape or straight to digital?
I believe it's to digital. It didn't sound like it was on tape to my memory. But I could be wrong. But I didn't have to mitigate any kind of like noise floor stuff that was too overt. And then I probably did some light parallel compression on the shells. Back then I didn't really do the whole drum bus. So that would have come in parallel. That would have been then shipped to a mix bus. That's my standard workflow is a sub mix bus.
Did you say shipped?
Shipped over, sent over, however you say it.
Well, you're in San Francisco, you're in a harbor town. So.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I can. So the way I work, I still work off these fundamentals, is I subgroup buses that end up all aligning at a mix bus unless I'm doing rear bus compression. Then I have 2 buses hitting another mix bus before it hits the master
Why
bus.
don't you, what's rear bus compression?
So that's actually built off the old Nice series who had a quad output. And Andrew Sheps was I think the first guy to really be accredited with using instead. So you used to have a quad listening environment on the old Neve 80 series where you could listen to the main left rights in front of you. We could also have rear speakers, quadraphonic outputs. And instead of using the rear bus speakers, that left right. So just think about, instead of a main left right bus, just think of 4 outputs. And your main monitoring output on a Neve 80 series is your 1 and 2, your left right bus. So instead of using 3 and 4 to monitor rear, he sent a parallel bus of the entire mix. I'm not sure if he sent vocals or not, but at least of all of the band, and then compressed that differently than he compressed his main mix bus. And then all of that hit the main bus at the same time. So at a base level, you're just doubling signal, which obviously makes it sound louder. You get that 3 dB thing. But when you compress it different, you compress it tighter, which gives you like more punch and resonance and more glue. and then you slowly bring that in, and it just adds this like really nice, thicker, fatter sound.
Now, do you remember, were there, did you send your drums into that back? What did you call it? The back bus? Or is that what
the rear bus? Rear bus compressor.
Yeah.
I didn't use rear bus on that one. I know that for a fact.
Okay.
But I was experimenting with that at the time. That arrangement was simple for me because, not simple in the technical process, because I was A-Bing every compressor plugin, every EQ compressor. I'd have like, what does the Neve EQ sound like? What does the SSL sound like? What does the SSLG sound like compared to the SSL? What happens if I put API saturation on? What is tape saturation? So I had to like meticulously just A-B everything. And I did that on every single channel.
Good Lord.
And I mean,
that sounds like the description of a failed mix, which is funny. But yet you found a way to take that process and maybe, I don't know, maybe just because you were so immersed in it, maybe because you were so thoughtful and careful about coming back and methodically, you said you're very organized too. So maybe your ability to do those comparisons and then choose one and come back and, make sure you're always moving forward allowed you to end up with something really great.
I think so. I think more than anything, all that A-Bing was necessary for me to understand at least the plug-in emulations. Yeah. What happens sonically when you put a distressor on a kick drum? What happens sonically when you put an SSL 4000G on an element or 4000E? And what are the sonic characteristics of how those EQs shape the individual tone of the element? When you do console saturation across the whole mix, I would put all the different console sats. Well, back then the Slate stuff made it still easy because you could group everything and you could switch which console you wanted to emulate and how much saturation you want to hit it. I use a lot of the Brainwork stuff for that now personally.
Yeah.
But, and then I would see, what does it sound like when the E's across the whole mix? What does it sound like when the G's across the whole mix, or a J or an API? And I was always looking for the sound I wanted and how to make it sound better and to learn. So now you're like, I got a vocal. I want that upper harmonic distortion. Let's throw it through an LA2A. I know how that's going to react to that vocal through that mic. So I already kind of know the sound and feeling I want. So now I can grab that gear, whether it be the hardware gear or a plugin. But that came through countless hours of meticulously analyzing. The thing about that mix was it was wonderfully recorded. It was a wonderful arrangement. You could have almost, as long as someone knew how to fader balance, put up a nice fader balance. And even at that level, because they were so good and it was so well recorded, unless you could probably make it sound halfway decent already as a mix. And I already intuitively understood that genre so well. I mean, the amount of time I've spent listening to Otis Redding and Ray Charles and Wilson Pickett and Aretha Franklin. There was a period when I learned about that stuff where that stuff is so washed over me. So it's a genre I really understood, first of all. So it was very intuitive of me to spread things out in the mix the way I wanted. And I understood that you needed clarity and separation. And I was learning how to do that through EQ separation. And I just had an intuition of how I wanted the mix to feel, where I wanted the elements to be. And I had a natural understanding from being, I played in orchestra and I played guitar for a long time. I used to listen to music obsessively. So I had a natural understanding when a guitar solo comes in, where should that be? I think that people don't talk enough about this in pop music, whether that's AC/DC, Rage Against the Machine, or Britney Spears. Something is always pulling focus, always. And it's usually always pulling focus up the middle at some point. Right. So whether that's a guitar solo or a reverb delay or the lead vocal. So I already had that kind of intuitive understanding that something needs to always be present and pulling focus if you want to maintain somebody's attention. Mm-hmm. And then through that process, I just got my mix together, and then I was scared to death. I showed it to the Mix Expo people. It was the late, great Gary Nobles, who we all know from the Amy Winehouse Black Album, and Frank Socorro, who's still out there kicking hard in Miami. He went back to running a studio after educating for a long time. So they picked my mix, and I was scared to death to show it in public, but I won. That's an organized atmosphere. Congrats. And that was like the pat on the back. It's like, all right, maybe I have a chance. At least I have a knack, an understanding. So maybe I have a chance that I can do this.
Empirical Labs, creators of the iconic Distressor, offer high-performance gear for audio professionals. The Fatso, or full analog tape simulator and optimizer, brings the warmth of vintage tape and tube electronics to your digital recordings. Perfect for mixes, masters, or overdubs by adding harmonic generation, high-frequency saturation, tape emulation, and compression. The impressive new Pump, a 500 series classic knee compressor, shares its DNA with the analog Distressor and Arouser plugin. It features 8 selectable compression ratios, precise attack and release controls, saturation, a high-pass filter, and a first-time ever attack mod for added transient control, which is ideal for adding more snap to your snare drum. All Empirical Labs products are hand-assembled and tested right down to the circuit boards in northern New Jersey, USA for durability and performance, designed to last and be easily updated. Go to empiricallabs.com to find the Arouser and Big Freak plugins, where you can use the coupon code RSR10 for 10% off. Remember to follow @Empirical Labs on Instagram, making studio gear that works a little easier, a little better, and a lot longer. Elevate your music production with the updated Complete 15 bundle from Native Instruments, featuring the new Contact 8. This comprehensive collection includes a fantastic range of versatile synths, sampled instruments, and innovative studio effects, giving you everything you need to bring your creative vision to life. Whether you're composing emotional scores, crafting deep dance floor grooves, or experimenting with unique sound design, Complete 15 has got you covered. Discover powerful plugins and instruments that guide you from the initial idea to the final mix. The included Contact 8 introduces exciting new tools like chords and phrases for instant inspiration, the Leap tool for dynamic looping, and Conflux, a cutting-edge hybrid instrument that merges organic and synth sounds in real time. Plus, enjoy revamped versions of Massive X and Guitar Rig 7 Pro to take your sound even further. Then, polish off your mixes with the AI-enhanced Isotope Ozone 11, included in the Complete 15 bundle. Use the code ROCK10 for 10% off at nativeinstruments.com. That's a cool story. Let's rewind and let's talk more about this skill set that helps you get through that methodical way of doing it. Because I think the rock stars listening now, I think we're all intrigued by the idea of all these plugins we've got. Mm-hmm. We maybe have had experiences of working too long on something, and then you get to the end and you're like, this sounds like a big pile of shit. I don't like it at all. And yet, it's inspiring to hear you talk about saying, you know what, I'm going to give myself the ability to learn what do all these do and see what I think. And I do think that's a valuable and a valuable experience. And I think there is a lot of potential in having a process like that to help us level up our own understanding of our own tools and our own ability to use them. But you have to do it pretty carefully. It's like doing mix revisions when you learn to use a mix reference plugin that allows you to carefully A/B things. It's like guests on the podcast who've talked about mastering and learning the skill of A/B listening for tiny changes and being able to come up with a process to do that to make sure that you're always incrementally like moving the needle forward. Mm-hmm. So how do you think you successfully did stuff? Let's just pick the console emulations for a sec. What would it be a process for you step by step of doing that? In other words, if you've got, and how many might you be comparing? Like 10 different options for console plugins that are mimicking a console for this mix? And if it's a bunch like that, how do you keep track of what you thought about this one versus that one? How do you have anything? And maybe I'm making this too complicated even.
You're not. I can make it real simple. I can tell you where I'm at today.
You know what I'm saying?
I do. For example, I take Brainworks SSLG, SSLE in a template, and SSL 9000. I tend not to use the 9000 because it's so clear that I'm just like, all right, well, at that point, like that's surgical. So, but at least the E and the G. And then I have the native Spark subscription to Universal Audio. So I have the native subscription to UADX. So I can also throw the 1073 channel strip across everything. So in my template, I have on the first 4 inserts, all of those. And I have the saturation like predefined. I quickly pull up a mono fader balance mix just so I can start to hear the song, after I've obviously listened to the song. As I'm listening to the song, I'm just getting a mono fader balance mix.
Like nothing's even panned. It's literally just mono.
No, I'd mix everything in mono now. Before I pan, if I pan and start panning, my mixes don't translate on the iPhone. If I start in mono and I get all my balance, EQ, and compression before my time-based effects, then when I start to fan things out and then I listen to my working mix on an iPhone, it already sounds great on. Well, great. That sounds so hubris. Oh my God. It sounds good on the iPhone. And that's like the hard thing to do is like, how do you make a mix on your
Which iPhone?
Speakers?
iPhone 12, iPhone
I have the 12
13,
Pro Max.
iPhone 15.
But my speakers are kind of janky. I don't know, I might have blew them out or something, but whatever. I start in mono. But then what I'll do is, before I even mess around with Heat on plugin, if you don't know about Heat on Pro Tools, that is the game changer plugin that comes with Pro Tools, but you have to kind of understand what it's doing. And if you don't hear that stuff in the studio and touch the analog gear, it's hard to completely appreciate what that's doing to a mix, other than it makes it sound better, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. But I will have them all in bypass. Then I'll highlight everything, shift option all, and I will literally enable every plugin across my mix. So and hear how that sonically shapes the mix and the tonal shift as one big broad painting stroke.
Let me re-say that to make sure we're being really clear over a podcast. Sure. So Rockstars, across every channel of all these instruments, again, if I hear you correctly, Case, you're doing a mono balance of all the instruments. So you're balancing all these faders so that it adds up as generally a good balance of the song. And then across each individual channel and maybe the mix bus, you've got a console emulator that mimics one of these one of a variety of console options. So when you say enable all the plugins across all of them, you're saying we're enabling all the SSL E series across all the channels. Correct. So that we're hearing this mono balanced mix as if it was being balanced on an SSL E for this, for example, A.
Yes.
Or example E. I'll keep letters. never patch in like line 4 to line 7 and then over to line 9. So I'll just call it all E for now.
Yeah. So basically, and I drive those a little bit in Brainworks. You can drive, I don't drive the gain, but I drive the saturation. And then I go, okay, that's what E's doing to it. Now I have a better ear to know the sonic characteristics usually of what you do and what kind of EQ curve and that's going to put across the mix. Then I do the G, then I do the Neve, and then I do the API. I have the vision strip, and I just see, okay, I think I kind of like that. That's cool. And then I also stop and I turn on Heat. And if people don't know about Heat and Pro Tools, it's probably the only thing that I've learned how to use that can give you the experience of rinsing stems through a tape machine and what that does to how those elements react in a speaker. The first time I rinsed stems, like on that Neverman mix, I tracked it and then I went in, spent hours meticulously getting those stems rinsed before we mixed.
What does that mean, rinsed?
To rinse stems, it's like you're washing them through the tape machine, I guess. Basically what you're doing is you're taking your Pro Tools stems and you're recording them onto a tape machine on individual tracks if you're doing a multi-track mix. And then you're taking those recorded elements on a tape machine and you're bringing them back into Pro Tools. So basically you're taking digital audio, recording that onto a multi-track tape machine, and then taking that tape analog audio and re-recording that back into the digital realm to
give it a little bit of that tape sound or whatever.
And it just, for me, like the first time I did it, it blew my mind. It was just like, the mix went from stereo to 3D. It just kind of just widens and just comes at you a little bit. But then you also have to deal with how do you mitigate tape hiss? Are you using Dolby properly in order to... And I found that if you literally... So Heat is a plugin that comes with Pro Tools, guys. If you don't already know it, guys and gals, is that if you there's two knobs. There's a tone. It's like a tilt EQ, and then there's I think it says drive or whatever. You turn it to the left, it's tape saturation. You turn it to the right, it's like analog saturation, like tube saturation, all that stuff, console saturation. And it's the only plugin I've seen take a mix and immediately kind of bring it forward and do the things that tape does. I knew that I didn't know how to do that back then, and the only way I could get that result was by running it through a tape machine. I didn't know how to make tape plugins do that. And I know there's tons of experienced engineers that know how to do that. I just didn't know how to do it. So Heat's only the simple answer I found to make that.
Okay, cool. So now we've got all these different ways. So do you find that just enabling all the plugins, disenabling them, and doing that fairly quickly, your brain just holds on to which one you like the sound of, and you just kind of do a few of them, narrow it down, and then just pick one and go from that point out?
Bingo. I usually start, especially if I'm mixing, I do that when I'm mixing in the box. First of all, to be very, very clear, that's when I'm only mixing in the box. That's not when I'm doing hybrid analog digital mixing.
Right. Yeah, we'll stick to mixing in the box.
Yeah,
I mean, that's, again, didn't we mention 99.9999% earlier on this podcast? That's who's listening.
Yeah.
Everybody's mixing on the box. Yeah. Everybody wants to. One thing I love about doing this podcast, about talking to you, having guests doing mix clinics, is we're talking about having the same set of tools and learning skills, developing our own skill set to use the very same tools more effectively to make our records, which makes it very exciting. It's not like having discussions back in the day where if you didn't have the keys to the incredible studio, forget it, you were never going to make a great record or something like that. Now it's like we've all got keys, we just misplaced them, or we just didn't know we had the keys. Okay, cool. So can I add one more thing to that?
Whatever you want.
I know, Case, you're like, Case, I thought you invited me to talk on the show.
This is your show.
No, but it's just, I love hearing you talk about this methodical way of doing it. And one of the ways that sometimes helps me, it's another app that I've talked about on the show a bunch, Samply, is a cloud hosting app for audio playlists. So we can use it for doing our mix notes with people back and forth when we're working on a record. I use it a lot to just sort of like, if I was doing your remix of, whoops, I hit delete. That's why I couldn't see the title of By My Side. Then I would have, for example, printed the 9000, printed the E, printed the G, printed the Heat version as a quick bounce out. And then if I import them all into a Samply player, then later, even like in the car or somewhere, I can flip between those different versions very quickly and decide even in another context which one I like the sound of, which could be very fun. Recently, I was playing around with one from a company called Sonimus. They make a great console emulator called A Console, and it just did such a cool thing for just some three-piece jamming we were doing in the studio, and I didn't change the mix at all. I just put it. I did Pro Tools with no console on there, and I bounced with the console on there. And these console plugins that you're talking about, Case, they really can give you this quality that reminds us of what we love about a record, a well-mixed record on a real console.
Yeah, and a cohesiveness to the mix. If you're using the same console on every element, then all these sonic characteristics are slightly embedded into the waveform that you bounce out. But my workflow is a little different in the sense of like, I like that's to come later and reflect on and have different options. That's not how I operate. Cool. I have to operate off pure intuition and pure instinct. And do I feel it or do I not feel it? And what's the thing that I feel in the moment the best? And then I just keep building off of that. This feels right. This feels good. And then I just mix it until I'm moving. And then I'd have to stop. I think if I allowed myself that many options or that much reflection, I'd probably start confusing myself personally.
Okay, cool. That's good to hear you say that. Yeah. It's just good to hear you describe that, because when you talked about trying so many things, there's an inclination for me to wonder if you're doing this, the reflection process So it's cool to hear you talk about like you find the one, it feels right, move forward. You know?
And the reason I had to do it that way is it's the only way I knew how to do it. I was by myself in a room for 10, 12 hours a day. My partner's an RN. She's gone all day long. So if I'm home alone, like, and I'm mixing at home, like, especially back then during pandemic with nothing to do, I didn't know what any of this stuff sounded like. So I just kept moving around until it felt right. I was like, oh, that feels right for this. And through that, and then I had to read the manuals of every plugin. What does all these buttons do, blah, blah. So it's the only way I knew how to get back to an emotional response. And the only way I could find the right emotional response of how things felt good was to just blindly go through every plugin on every element, listen to I didn't know what a difference between a hall and a chamber and a plate sounded like. The other day I was working on settings with someone. I was like, hey, what is that decay time around like 3.5? He's like, wow. I was like, can we turn that back to about 2.5? He's like, whoa. He's like, it was 3.2. I was like, what's your pre-delay? Let's get that up to, like, to be able to hear this. But back then I didn't know what a 3.5 second, but now I can more intuitively do that because I went through that grueling process. And I do the same thing now, just a lot faster. Because I know, I pretty much think I know what a distressor with the harmonics set up to 3 distortion is going to sound like on an element and how that's going to brighten up a sound. Or if I want something with a little more weight, I might grab a Uri 1176 and then make it act the way I want it to go. Or if I can get a 70s style API preamp to get that warmer sound if I'm lucky, or like the sharper Neve, like bright. So that all just happens. It's just faster now. And I'm not always right with my first attempt. And then so I'm just like, what feels good? And I can just move a lot faster than I used to. But
so
I didn't know what anything sounded like. So I decided to just do it like that.
One of the instruments in the mix is horns. What do you remember about things that seem to work for the horns mixing?
Okay, I have a philosophy about horns. I guess it's because I want them to sound raw, and I want them to sound big, and I hope a Barry's always in that arrangement because that really helps a lot with that. And I know where I want them fanned out in the mix. So I already have a philosophy of where I like things to be. That would have started mainly with panning. Since the Barry is the lowest, that's going to be closest to the center. I'm thinking in terms of the whole arrangement. And balance, obviously, like the higher tones, like the trumpets need to be usually the volume quieter. And those all are going to hit bus compression as a group. So I can glue those together. I have no idea. Maybe I just used an SSL. I have no idea what I did on that. I like to use LA2As are a great example, as long as they're not getting too harsh, because then it's just a slower compressor.
Even on a bus compression for something.
Why not? Like why not? Who cares? Like, I don't want it to be noticeable. I'm just trying to get some glue. I'm totally down. I do a lot of Fairchilds on guitar bus compression, group bus compression. They're slow and they glue and they're sexy.
What's a favorite Fairchild plugin?
I just use that 670. That's the only one I know how to use.
No, but I mean, is it like a brand that you really like?
Oh, the UADX, the Universal Audio Fairchild. Yeah. A lot of the stuff I use is the Universal Audio stuff, and a lot of sound toys for creative, and a lot of Brainworks for emulation.
If you needed an update, did you literally just open your window and hollow down the street? And
exactly.
Just send you an update for the plugin.
Hey, Scotts Valley. And then I used the Sans amp to add grit. I did the same thing on a recent mix. Then I parallel the Sans amp in or wet dry it just to give it a bullet. I mean, I like that dirt in there. When you listen to that, I like to feel it in the belly. For me, it's got to be in the belly. I mean, listen to James Brown, man. Listen to those horns. Listen to those Stax records. Listen to like the feeling of Otis Redding and those horn sections. Like, none of that music's cerebral. None of it. I'm sorry. It's in the heart and it's in the belly. It's birthed out of American suffering and pain and joy and horror. Like that is just people music at its core. And there's a rawness in those horns and an emotion in those horns, and that there's just an attitude. So I find that the Sans app helps me get it. I just got to put in a little grit. Group bust them, do a nice little fan out. So that's probably exactly what I did on that mix.
For 15 years, I owned a famous MCI console that came from Criteria Studio C in Miami, where it made many Grammy-winning records in the 1970s, and it sounded amazing. When I was ready to upgrade my studio to full digital mixing, I decided to team up with Rick Carson at Make Believe Studio, Metric Halo, and Golden Ear producer Bill Simzik to recreate the legendary MCI console as the new MBSI plugin. This isn't just another boring plugin. The MBSI captures that same iconic sound that was used on multi-million selling records like Hotel California for the Eagles, produced by Bill Simzik, Saturday Night Fever and Stayin' Alive for the Bee Gees, I Shot the Sheriff for Eric Clapton, We're an American Band for Grand Funk Railroad, and the soundtrack to Grease, and was loved by legendary producers like Tom Dowd, Todd Rundgren, and Bill Simzik, to name just a few. The MBSI plugin not only delivers the authentic sound of the original MCI console faithfully, but it also adds new features like a top-notch compressor, overdrive, and a high and low-pass filter switch. Features I always wished that the console had. Now you too can get that Grammy-winning MCI sound in your home studio, just like me. Whether you're recording or mixing, you can experience the sound of Miami 1976 with the MBSI plugin and soak up a little sunshine in your sound. Go to makebelievestudio.com/MBSI. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak or distant or lack punch or clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio using free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you're using. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can use the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. On the SansAmp plugin, are there any of the knobs on that plugin that we should be afraid of or not afraid of? Are there knobs that we sometimes forget to turn on that and we should be more bold about it?
That's a good question. I only use two knobs, which is like the gain and the drive, and I just make sure it's not distorting. I just kind of listen until I start getting a little grit.
So I actually forgot what the different names are. They're kind of like bass, mid, and treble, but not really. They're sort of like different amps almost. You don't mess around with those quite as much.
I'm just trying to get a little drive, and then the wet-dry balance.
Yeah, right on.
So I run them. I learned this from Sylvia Massey, actually, at NAMM. She runs the SansAmp in parallel on all her bass tracks. That's a really good technique. So you get your cleaner DI sound or your cleaner amp sound, and then you get a grittier SansAmp parallel bass, and you kind of blend that in. That's a good technique. Yeah. I started using that on bass, too. So it's basically the way I treat the horns, is add that kind of like... But I think there's a wet-dry knob on it, so you don't have to run it in parallel. Or it's just that you can just run it at 100% and just kind of blend the gain in to where you want it to
There's a Nembrini is a company that makes a PSA 1000, which I think is a SansAmp emulator that does actually have a wet-dry knob on it. So if you wanted to put it directly on a sound, you can just kind of feather it in that way, which I think Chad Blake was saying the nice thing about that is that it was more likely to be phase coherent than parallel or something. But I don't know. In the end, you got to use your ears anyway.
Yeah, I don't have when people start talking about like plug-in latency phase, I mean, I know Pro Tools has latency compensation. I mix at 1024 buffer rate usually, unless I'm on the HDX system that you can do more. But I don't have the ears for any of that stuff. I just move the knobs until it feels good.
Yeah. Yeah. So then the next question about feel good stuff is, when feeling is so crucial in the creation of the music and in the mixing and the mastering, like every stage, do you sometimes go into the studio and find, oh shit, I'm not ready. I'm not bringing the right me to bring feeling to this. And do you have a way to make sure that you're always bringing the feeling version of Case to this mix when you sit down to work on stuff?
Mix, I can, if I'm alone in a room, I can take a break or whatever. But tracking, I have to be 100% conscious of my energy during the tracking process. I was getting a little keyed up the other day, moving fast, trying to catch some stuff. And I could tell that energy was about to affect the person that was recording. I saw them kind of just like, they're OG player, and they were just kind of breathing, and I saw them breathing, and I'm like, all right, I'm getting a little hyper. And I even mentioned like, oh, I can tell my energy's getting a little hyper. Let me settle down for you. Let's get into, let's breathe before it's time to play. Because you start bringing that kind of tension into the room, and people, if they're not aware of it, are reacting to it, whether they know they are or not. I think a lot of that's just about, for me, being well rested, being healthy, to be able to be in control and aware of myself, and be able to bring good energy to projects.
Yeah, no, it makes funny. It immediately makes me remember a session I was doing with a client here, and I was pushing my boundaries to keep working on something. And it was when I was trying to learn how to do boundaries between family and recording sessions. So I was like slamming out the very last overdub, and I was like, gotta run, because it was dinner time or something, and I was about to miss the family dinner. And I literally like hit a button and I sprinted out the door, and I left this poor artist just like hanging out on the microphone going like, what the fuck just happened? Where did you just go?
Oh no.
And, it was in my brain, I was like, I'm really dialing it in. I'm balancing everything. I'm like recording with this person, but I'm also going to make it to dinner on time, and I'm sprinting out the door at the last second. But what I didn't do is I didn't do what you did, was acknowledge what move, where the artist was at in that moment, and communicate well enough to let them understand that that's what I was trying to do or whatever. And it's funny to think about that speed. There are times too where speed, like for me, I have to do vocal comping. There's some things I have to do fast. Like I have to go into my zone and comp the vocals quickly. And there is a way to participate in it with me, but sometimes it's better if the other people on the session just kind of wait till I'm done and then let me play it for you and then respond to it. And we'll go seek out other versions of lines if they don't hit you right or something. And, and definitely like having the ability to self-recognize like you just described and even communicate to the artist about it is so crucial. So that you can bring, those opportunities and methods to your session.
I think communication, especially proactive communication, is the key to success. One of the main fundamental keys to success in any industry, in any relationship. I cannot believe how many people, I'm like one of those people that walk around going like, why is everybody so reactive? Why didn't just somebody, because I think most people think about things that need to be done, but just presume they're going to work themselves out, or presume somebody else is going to take care of it. Or maybe they just don't have the natural instincts to want to lead or take care, or just be the one that takes care of business. I think that I'm intuitively wired that way, and I've always been really good about foreseeing issues and wanting to mitigate those issues ahead of time. And I find that being proactive is the best way to control the variables to get the best outcome.
Yeah.
I show up early to the studio. I try to show up at least 30 minutes because like, what if someone didn't make the coffee? What if they didn't clean the dishes? What if for some reason the trash happened to be overflowing because there was a late night, midnight session and the overnight cleaning person got sick and I didn't know about it? Or like, what if like just constantly like, do you need a parking spot for the session? Like any little thing. I'm just always trying to think ahead, plan ahead, and then be vocal about it. I
right
think
on.
Very, very, I think communication is very, very key, and proactive communication is very, very key.
Well, in the spirit of communication, I'm going to communicate this to you. I'm going to say thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today, Case. It's been awesome hanging out with you and chatting about this stuff, and I like that we got to be very meta about it. And I have one more question for you.
Okay, I'm ready. Thanks for having me, by the way. I'm happy to be here. It's
glad
fun.
to have you here, man. This one is hypothetical, and love to ask it of all my guests. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back in time and find young Case. Maybe you walk into the bar and you're like, "Hey, Case, you're Case. I'm Case also." You know, or maybe you go back further than that. But you go back and find younger you, and you say, "Listen, I've come back in time to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing that you really need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day." What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
In specific to the studio?
If you're feeling it.
There's so many advices. Just learn how to be a team player. And I think I wish I would have understood that in anything in my life as a young man. It's about teamwork, and it's about being supportive and knowing your place in the room and communication. And just, it takes a team of people to do anything great. Nobody did anything alone.
Yeah.
And the layers that go into that are humility, effort, awareness. There's so many deep things that go into that. But at the base, just learn how to be a team player, because it takes a team, and know your role in the team.
Yeah.
And you do that, people are going to want to work with you. You're going to be more successful and get better work done.
I think that's wise advice. It reminds me of the times that I over participated in anything because I felt so much that I had so much to offer that I wanted to prove that, and then I spoiled the recipe or whatever, like overproducing on early sessions, offering too much feedback on parts, and then finally learning that in the end, it's like, give of yourself, like you say, but let the team do what it does, because it's going to be the best result in the end.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has something to offer.
Case, how can the Rockstars find out more about you, man? What if they love the sound of coming to San Francisco and making a record with you at your studio at Hyde Studio, having you mix it and quickly audition all the best heat and console plugins for their sound of their record? How should they find you?
Come see the real console and see the real plug and see the real
stuff.
Go
to the real deal.
It's really easy. I'm really easy to find. CaseNewcomb.com. My email is case@casenewcomb.com. Instagram, Case Newcomb. I'm pretty straightforward. If you learn my first and last name, you can very easily find me.
NEWCOMB. Rockstars.
Like a new comb for your hair.
Yeah, which you got a lot of hair. It's just on the wrong side of your head, Case.
I guess it depends on where you want your hair.
So Rockstars, you can't see Case unless you're getting the video, but he's got an impressively awesome beard.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. Dude, thanks for hanging with us, Rockstars. Thanks so much for listening. And Case, I look forward to seeing you again in person, man. And, maybe it'll be sometime before next time we're at NAMM.
I hope so. Thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me on your show.
You're welcome, man. Thanks for hanging, and we'll see you soon, dude. Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this show possible. iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, Empirical Labs, Sound Porter Mastering, and Trace Audio. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon codes. At iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plug-in purchase. At empiricallabs.com, Use the code RSR10 for 10% off the Arouser and Big Freak plugins. And finally, use the code RSR15 to get 15% off your custom patch bay labels at traceaudio.com. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio, and they're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and Liz Hulitskaya. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars. We'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.